Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I love doing Weird Science. I've done these kinds of things for 19 years now. Next year will be my 20th anniversary. I've done it all over the eastern half of the United States. I've done it in the UK. I will do it anywhere if you know anybody that you think would enjoy this. So thank you guys for inviting me to come out. It is great to be here in person. I've done so many of these by Zoom. I am sick of Zoom. It is nice to be here face to face with you guys. Like Catherine said, this is not a talk. This is not a lecture. This is an open discussion where we are all going to be talking about science and the scientific process of some of the strangest science studies ever conducted. And you guys are also going to do some science, and we're going to compare the results from what we do here to the published study that you guys are replicating. I thought I'd start with this. This is an example on social media of a way scientists have come up with to engage people in science. So we've got a brachiosaurus here, and it's projectile vomiting. And the idea is how much force is produced from a brachiosaurus that's sick to its stomach. From the height that it's suggested there, we've got an impact of 6,800 joules with an average force of a little over 68,000 newtons. Now this is great for teaching physics and mathematics, but as a biologist, this kind of fails epically. There are really three basic biology issues here with this. Can anybody point out any of them? Yes?
Projectile vomiting, you're only allowing for gravity. You're not allowing for projectile vomiting.
Absolutely. How many people here, show of hands, how many people here have ever vomited? Yes, when you guys happen to have vomited, do you go into the bathroom and stand up as large and as straight as you can to then vomit? No, you are bent over praying to whatever deity you can think of to get over whatever it is that's causing this. So the idea that this dinosaur is going to vomit with its neck sticking straight up in the air is absolutely wrong. Which then brings us to the question, does everything vomit? You absolutely do that. Yeah, do you guys know of things that don't necessarily vomit? Horses. Birds tend to actually excrete sort of a rock-like pellet, and from fossil information, that's what we think dinosaurs did. So the idea that this dinosaur is going to vomit this large chunk of something out is really biologically wrong. Now, we've got a couple kids in the room. Do you guys know what brachiosauruses ate? Plants! Yes, so why is this thing vomiting up a velociraptor? So this is a great example of where scientists are trying to do something to engage people in the topic, but we haven't really done all of our homework, and we've really missed the target. So if you guys are wondering what you are in for the next hour-ish, it's going to be lots of talk like this. And we're going to talk about published science studies. So the first one we're going to talk about is testing the validity of the Danish urban myth that alcohol can be absorbed through the feet. This is an open-labeled, self-experimental study. This was published in the British Medical Journal back in 2010. So get ready. We're going to have to be drinking for science tonight. So the background, we always look at a science study looking at what was previously known, what information was there to allow us to form our hypothesis. And that's the scientific question that we're actually going to test. So there is this Danish legend that if you stick your feet in alcohol, you can actually get drunk. There's also another legend that says if you stick your feet in, you can turn your urine red by sticking your feet into red beet juice. So somehow you're absorbing that beetroot juice through your feet, and it's turning your urine red. So the question we're getting at is, are these legends are true? Now, the cool thing about Weird Science, We are all innately curious scientists. Even if you haven't had any formal training, it doesn't matter. You've got the ability to do science all on yourself. So we're going to design an experiment to test this just here today, and then we'll compare it with what they actually did. So how would you design an experiment to test this? So my first question is, what kind of alcohol are you going to use? What's that? Beer. Why do you say beer?
Because it's like one of the main alcohols that people drink along with wine.
Absolutely. I love a good beer, but would you pick beer or wine or do both?
Probably try both. And see
Try
if
both?
one would work, find it worked at all.
That's good. Yeah, what about you?
I'd probably say try like a range of different alcohols.
Like what besides beer and wine?
I am not.
Totally fair. I totally understand. But I love the range of alcohols. That's excellent. Anybody else have an idea of what they might suggest? Yes?
I would use a high-proof liquor.
Why? Now, by high proof, for our young audience here, what does high proof mean?
So beer is usually 5% is most of the, wine is 12%. Most liquor that you buy at the liquor store is 80 proof,
Mm-hmm.
which means that it's 60% water. So I would use a high proof, more like 150 proof.
Yeah.
Something like that. And I have a specific reason when you get to it.
That's good. So your beer and your wine, those are great ideas, but those have lower amounts of alcohol than some of the alcohol like he's suggesting. So if we use something that has high alcohol content, that might really maximize our ability then to absorb something through the feet. Do you want to add your particular flavor?
So ethanol, which all these alcohols for your education is ethanol. They're not different alcohols.
Right.
As opposed to isopropyl or
Different alcohol molecules.
ethanol is an alcohol.
Yeah.
So I believe that it would absorb through the skin, but because of the vaporization point of ethanol, which 60 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm going to put my 98.6 degree body in that alcohol. It's going to vaporize off, and I'm going to breathe it in more so than I'm going to absorb it.
Interesting, yeah. So, but potentially we want to use something like Everclear, something that has high alcohol content. Yes. Not that I am a heavy drinker. So, what are we going to use to measure if we're absorbing alcohol or not? Blood level. So we could take blood alcohol as measurements of if we're actually absorbing it into our bloodstream or not. That's absolutely spot on. The study we're going to talk about did that, but they also did some other stuff as well. So what is our control? A control is something we use in addition to our experiment. That's going to be like beer, wine, like Everclear, something with high alcohol content. We use a control to show that other variables aren't causing what we're studying, in this case, alcohol in the bloodstream, so we can rule out everything else except what it is we're studying. What are we going to use for a control?
Time.
Time. That's good. We can measure the amount of time it takes potentially for alcohol to be absorbed through the bloodstream. That's good. What else?
Water.
Water. Who said water? Excellent. In fact, yes, something that has absolutely no alcohol content. Potentially, if those people start exhibiting alcohol in their bloodstream or drunk kinds of behaviors, then we know there's some other factor that's causing it outside of what we measured, and our study isn't good. That's excellent. See, you guys are fantastic scientists. You could design this study and do it. That's why I love doing this kind of stuff. Okay, so
Well,
they
can I ask a question?
Yes.
Well, what about the variable of the feet? I mean, some feet are highly callous,
Yes, that's
some are
very
soft
true.
on the bottom.
Yeah,
the
and we'll
absorbability.
talk about exactly what they did with that, but yes, you bring up very interesting points around that. The size, the surface area of the foot, potentially if there are breaks in the skin, how can that contribute? Absolutely, those are great points to bring up. So the authors of this study called it the Peace on Earth study, which stands for percutaneous ethanol absorption could evoke ongoing nationwide euphoria and random tender hugs. Peace on Earth. You know they worked a long time on that. So they had 3 healthy adults that participated as subjects in the study. None of them have been implicated in any serious accidents or socially embarrassing events related to alcohol during the week before the experiment. Now, I don't know why they isolated this to only the week before, but that's the data that we got. Maybe something happened longer than a week ago. They did not drink alcohol 24 hours before the experiment, and as we discussed, the night before, they rubbed their feet with loofah to exfoliate, to remove any dead skin. That way, hopefully, if absorption can occur, they sort of maximize the ability to do it. But those are excellent points that you made. And then finally, the day of the experiment, their baseline blood alcohol level was recorded, and it was zero. So we know we start from 0. All right, so how did they do the experiment? Well, in this case, they submerged their feet in a wash bowl of 2,100 milliliters of vodka. And I think that's really interesting, given our discussions of the alcohol content of various alcohols. So vodka has more than something like beer and wine, not necessarily as much as Everclear or other grain alcohol. So sort of in the middle there. And plasma blood alcohol levels were taken every 30 minutes for the 3 hours duration of their study. All right, you ready for their data? Okay, so they also recorded, in addition to blood alcohol, they self-reported on a scale of 1 to 10 drunk-like symptoms or behavior, including their feelings of self-confidence, their urge to speak, because you know if you get drunk, some people get really loud, and the number of spontaneous hugs. All right, so the demographics, the information about the 3 participants, their average age was 32 years, which a range of 31 to 35. They covered the surface area of their feet, so we have some information about that. Their alcohol average intake, which leads us then to the data itself. So here is on the x-axis the 30 minutes intervals of the 3 hours of the study. And on the y, we have that score of 1 to 10 for those self-reported behaviors. Self-confidence is in purple. They started kind of at about a 5.5 average at time 0. By 90 minutes, that had gone up to just under 8, and then it drops back down at the end of the experiment to just over 6. So a little bit of an increase, but it sort of stays exactly about the same throughout. Urge to speak, we started about a 3. We go up then about an hour into a little bit more than a 5, and we end about that same place. Spontaneous hugs, nobody's hugging, and then all of a sudden, an hour and a half in, somebody gets a little squirrely, we got some hugs going on there, and then by the end of it, no hugs are going on there. So the values on the graph are median ranges. Come on in, just talking about weird science, grab some chairs. But most importantly then, plasma blood alcohol levels were below the limit of detection, and it's important to note, no study is perfect, so we have limits of detection here, and their limit was 10 milligrams per milliliter of blood. And that was for the duration of the experiment. So they never detected any blood alcohol in any of the 3 people submerging their feet in vodka. So the conclusions of our study, it's a myth. We have busted it. So you cannot absorb alcohol by submerging your feet in alcohol. So the authors of the study do admit, and this is getting to our discussion about what alcohol to work with, that it's possible that higher alcohol content drinks, like they said absinthe, may actually work. So while this study is great, it's not necessarily definitive. You might need to repeat it with a higher alcohol content drink. They also said, and this gets to what you were saying, ma'am, which is perfect, that absorption could be helped if you've got breaks in the skin of your foot, allowing direct contact then with the bloodstream. But again, they didn't test this.
Yeah.
Now, when we do a study, at the very end when we publish it, we write what's called a conclusion and discussion section. The discussion allows us to take our results and kind of extrapolate them in a bigger way to show bigger value to what we've done. And they have some interesting conclusions and discussions that they're drawing here. But it's important to sort of critically read these to make sure that the study results really support the information that they're sharing. So the authors of this study say that their results are supported by another study that was published in which ethylene glycol absorption was slow and of low concentration through the skin of 6 frozen cadavers. Now they do note that the last study is not directly applicable to the one we've talked about because of the frozen state. So that's good, noting the differences, but interesting nonetheless. Now, I think this is really interesting as they try to draw conclusions from their results. So they say the implications of the study are many, and we will mention a few. First, leading or driving a vessel with boots full of vodka seems to be safe. Now, based on the conclusions, based on the data that you've seen, is that statement accurate? Have they shown that driving a boat with boots full of vodka would be safe? Well, they showed that no vodka could be absorbed. Why do you say no?
That sounds dangerous to drive with. Trying to hit the brake pedal, that doesn't seem safe.
So that's interesting. So you're saying that there are other factors other than the alcohol absorption contributing to make this unsafe.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I like what you're saying, that they've shown you can't absorb vodka, so at least having vodka in your boots is okay, yeah.
Yeah, also, they were testing over the span of, like, 3 hours.
3 hours,
or
yeah.
something. So, and there was still nothing, there was no blood change recorded over 3 hours. So unless you're driving for quite a long time, even if there is an effect, that's gonna take a while to kick in.
So maybe this only applies if it's 3 hours or less, is what you're saying. I love that. Now, I think this next statement is really interesting. Brewery workers cannot become intoxicated by falling into a brewery vat. From their conclusions, is that true? Why do you say no?
Well, my biggest issue with this thing is there's only 3 people that they looked into, so you can't draw any
Absolutely.
conclusions.
So statistically speaking, and Alex can speak to this, their N is incredibly low, yes. But any other beef that you have with
Well, they
this?
only tested the feet.
They
So
only
if
tested the
you're
feet.
falling into it, maybe you can absorb it in your hands.
Or maybe you could have drank some as you fell into the.
Exactly.
What if we like dive in?
So this is unfortunately overreached by the scientists that did this study. Their results don't back this up because there are plenty of ways if you fall into a bout of alcohol, you can ingest it without it going through your feet or your skin, and you can become intoxicated. So I love to point this out because it shows that while the science may be a little questionable, our N is low, we use vodka instead of a higher level content of alcohol, their conclusion is not supported by what we show. So unfortunately, if this gets picked up in the media, and the media begins the headline of their study with, study shows brewery workers cannot become intoxicated by falling in vat of alcohol, this is not what the study shows. But unfortunately, this is what ends up being promoted. So it's the difference between understanding what the science has shown and claiming something that the science doesn't back up. So as ourselves, as scientists, we have to watch those overstatements. Yeah, you have your hand up.
A brewery does not make concentrated alcohol.
Yes, very true.
They're in a beer level, assuming that it's been fermented.
Absolutely.
And there's even a liquid in the vat.
Absolutely. So multiple issues here. Yes, I love it. Okay, any other comments about this study before we jump to the next? All right. How many people here, is anyone, raise your hand if you've ever been stung by an insect?
Yep.
Yes. Almost everybody has. And I love our female scientist here modeling her bikini. See what I did there? Bikini. See? Even if the humor is totally cheesy, it's still humor. Science is fun. I hope people take away that science is fun and everybody should enjoy it. So everybody got stung by a bee. Scale, or stung by an insect. Scale of 1 to 10, how much did your sting hurt? Yeah, how about you?
5.
5? 3?
7.
7? 1?
I barely react to it.
Yeah, that's perfect. Anybody else?
Yeah.
8, yes.
I'm about an 8 too.
8, yes. So what kind of insect was it? Do you guys know what you were stung by?
Wasp.
Wasp? Yeah.
I was stung by a hornet. I don't know
Hornet?
what kind of hornet.
But a hornet.
Bee and wasp.
Bee and wasp?
Yellow jacket.
Yellow jacket. That's
Yeah,
okay.
yellow
Yes.
jacket.
So
Yes.
I'm 1 for bees, but like an 8 for hornets.
Oh, and
Wasp.
that's
Okay.
exactly, that is exactly the point we're getting at,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
this guy is an entomologist. This is his book, Dr. Justin Schmidt. He has actually created a 4-point pain scale relating how painful the stings are of 78 different species of Hymenoptera. So these are going to be things like sawflies, wasps, bees, and ants. So honeybees were rated a 2, kind of in the middle. If you guys are interested, it's a really fascinating book. I borrowed this from one of the faculty members at Middlebury. It's really, really fun. So honeybees were used as a 2 and then used as a comparison to other insects. So this is his scale. So at number 1, the lightest, this is going to be a fire ant or a sweet bee. This is described by him as white, ephemeral, almost fruity. A tiny spark has singed a single hair on your arm. So that's what it's like to be stung by a level 1 insect. Level 2, these are going to be honeybees or jack jumper ants. This is described as an oven mitt with a hole in it when you pulled the cookies out of the oven. I love how both of these somehow relate to food when we're judging pain scale. So that's 1 and 2. 3, we've got yellow paper wasps and flora harvester ants. This is bold and unrelenting. Someone is using a power drill to excavate your ingrown toenail. Pain, yes. So that's a 3, that leads us to 4. It's going to be things like a bullet ant. Hang on just a second, let me finish this, I'll come back to you. A bullet ant or a tarantula hawk wasp. So these things are described as blindingly fierce, shockingly electric. A running hairdryer has just been dropped into your bubble bath. Pain, 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 yes.
I've got an issue with number 2.
Number 2?
Should have a hole in your mitt when you take something out of the oven.
Oh, okay. Hang on, let me go back. Yes. So number 2, how painful that is.
I think that could really smart.
Yeah, but if you think about number 3, where you've got someone who's using a power drill to excavate your ingrown toenail, that I do think that is a level of pain over the mitt. But yes, I completely agree. None of this is terribly pleasant. I guarantee you that. All right, so, but the question then is, does the location on your body where the sting occur impact how much it hurts? Yes?
I also just wanted to ask, I'm not sure if you know this, but how did they collect that data? Was it just like he stuck his hand in a box and sort of waited?
We're not going to talk about how Justin Schmidt did his. You can read his book if you want to know. We're going to talk about this next study.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, bee puns really sting. Again, it's funny. It's funny. It doesn't have to be good. It has to be funny. All right, so what we're talking about here is honeybee sting pain index by body location. This was published in the journal Peer J in 2014. So this was by Michael Smith. He's building on what Justin Schmidt did with his pain index. So it's important to note, the study author was the only participant in this study. You might comment on that later when we look at the data. So he selected 25 locations on his body where he was going to be stung. So the forearm was used as an internal standard. So this was sort of his baseline pain for a sting. Then he compared that to being stung in other body parts. The author self-administered 5 stings per day, with the first and last being the internal standard. So let's say today he was going to be stung on his knee. He would first sting himself on his forearm, sting himself on his knee 3 times, and then end with stinging himself on his forearm. You start to begin to appreciate the level of horror that is this study. Pain from each sting then was compared to the pain of being stung on the forearm. They were rated a 1 to 10. The forearm was in the middle as a 5. And he used 5 minutes between each sting. That way he sort of had time to recover. And all stings were conducted between 9 and 10 a.m. I don't know why he chose that time. That's just what he chose. And finally, 3 full rounds of stings were conducted. So we had 25 locations. So he conducted stinging all those 25 locations with the forearm, 3 stings, forearm, 3 different times. Bee selection. So we had a question about how did we actually get the bees or the insects that were being stung. So he collected these directly from the hive. He only selected guard bees, and they were used immediately. So he would grab them by the wings, press them against the target area. He left them there for 5 seconds post-sting when he could feel it, and then the bee was removed with the stinger left in his skin for 1 minute. So he gives us very detailed information about how he was doing it, and it lets us appreciate how horrible this is even more. The author then stung. If you want to do a little math, do this with like kids. Figure out how many times he was stung. So over 38 days, 5 times per day, it's about 190 stings. That's a lot of stings. So let's look at those 25 places on his body he picked in some lovely cartoons. We have being stung in the nostril, in the cheek, in the upper lip. We have behind the ear, back of the neck, lower back, the butt, wrist palm, back of the knee, calf, the foot. Then we have the skull, armpits, upper arm, genitals, top of the hand, top of the foot, and the middle toe. I love doing this because the cringe factor is so huge. So here is his data. So we have the average rating for each of the body positions and the standard deviation. Remember, the forearm was in the middle, rated as a 5. So the least painful anatomic positions, anatomic places, were the skull, the middle toe, and the upper arm. The most painful were the nostril, the upper lip, and then his genitals. And that pain is a 9 in the nostril. So he likes to say that the variability at each of the positions is low. So he uses the standard deviation of his ratings to show that. So we've got a standard deviation of like 0.6, 1.7, 1.2. In some cases, there was no standard deviation, especially for some of these more painful ones. So he likes to claim, and his claim is, that his values are consistent then because the standard deviations are low. Yes, you had a question?
Did he indicate what order the stings occurred?
He did not around like which body parts he went to. No, we don't know that. We know he did the pattern of forearm, 3 places, forearm, but we don't know what order they were in. So like I said, he says his variability of scoring is low. And clearly the location of the sting had a significant impact on the pain. So what I like, he does not draw these conclusions, I draw these conclusions. I like to say then, don't stick bees up your nose, don't kiss a bee, and don't put a bee down your pants. I think those are valuable lessons we can all take away from this study. And if you're a fan of bee Hollywood sci-fi movies, don't date a bee girl.
Maybe the bee girls.
So, what do you guys think of this study? Do you think it's well done, well constructed, well laid out, or do you have concerns, ways that we could improve this study? Yeah?
Well,
Well, I like the idea that he stuck himself multiple times to like see if it was consistent, but it seems like if you did multiple times in the same spot, it would hurt worse the more you did it.
Right. What do you think about a person's ability to accurately describe how painful something is, especially in comparison to somebody else?
Yeah,
Right, yeah. It's very subjective.
People
It's
experience
subjective, yes.
ton of
Yes.
variability from each individual.
Absolutely. So he tries to show his standard deviation is very tight, so he feels his measurements are accurate, and they may be accurate for him. But we only have, as you pointed out in our previous study, we only have one participant. Our N is terrible, so it's really hard to extrapolate this to a lot of people. Now, admittedly, things in the most extreme category, I think we could probably all agree, those are probably going to hurt the worst. The question kind of becomes in the middle. I think there's going to be more variability there, and some people might rate those areas more or less painful than he does. I saw a hand in the back.
Did he participate in the first study?
I don't believe he did, but clearly he was motivated by that first study to bring this in. Yes. Yeah, you had a question.
Also, when you press a bee against whatever part of your body, let's say your forearm for this example, you don't know exactly where it's going to sting.
Right.
And depending on if it hits in the same spot that the last stinger hit, depending on whether or not the stinger is removed or not,
Yeah.
it's going to hurt either a lot more or a bit less,
Yeah.
right? Also, depending on if it hits like a blood vessel or
Oh,
whatnot, that could change various different things.
Right. So maybe even drilling down farther with his anatomy and in some ways really specifying by a marker or something so that each of those spots is laid out to repeat that over and over again would improve it. Yes. But clearly, this is a horror show and it's interesting, but there are some limitations to how we can extrapolate this data, how we can use this data to view how other people might appreciate how painful a sting is. But I'll tell you, I don't want to be stung in the nostril. All right, so our next study is something that's called a case study. So what we've talked about up to now is really what's called hypothesis-driven research, where we have a scientific question, can we test the validity of you can absorb alcohol through your feet? That's a hypothesis. And then we design a study around it. Case studies are a little bit different. They can be hypothesis-driven, but they're very much observational. We see this a lot in field work, where you see something that's so unique, it's never been described before, you have to write it up. And that's what we're going to talk about now. It's actually a medical case study. I have a medical background. That's what I do in my day job, so I love to bring in medicine when I can. We're going to time travel a little bit. Back to 1972, the year after I was born. So this was a long time ago. Back when things on the Billboard Top 10 were things like Papa Was a Rolling Stone, Long Cool Woman, Nights in White Satin. I love Moody Blues. But think about it, we're back in 1972 now. Here is our medical case. A mom brings her 12-year-old boy to the hospital. The child has a history of constipation. 6 months before the visit, he was noted as having vomited coffee ground-like material twice, so maybe the kid has some stomach issues going on here. He's previously had 2 upper gastrointestinal system x-rays looking to see if there are any problems, and those were negative. He's got no other symptoms besides this. His poop looks like strawberry ice cream.
Oh my.
This is what's coming out of his butt. And mom is freaked out. Now, mom is freaked out because anytime we see something red in the stool, you worry that maybe someone is bleeding somewhere in their GI system. And this is what we're seeing because of that. So, what do you think could be the cause here? Obviously, I talked about the one medical one. We've got bleeding in the GI system. But what else could be the cause here? The title of the session is Weird Science, and I can guarantee you it's going to be weird. Yes?
Some foods have dyes and such, so if it's a food with heavy pigmentation.
Absolutely, and in this case, we are talking about a cereal that was just released in store shelves, Frankenberry. And I love doing this story this time of year because Frankenberry is back. If you go to your local store, you can once again find Frankenberry, and you can replicate this yourself. So this study is called benign red pigmentation of stool resulting from food coloring in a new breakfast cereal. And now the term coined is the Frankenberry stool. So this was published in the journal Pediatrics in 1972. So our further information about our case here. Mom said that the kid had eaten a bowl of Frankenberry cereal 2 days and 1 day before he was brought to the hospital. Right now there's no evidence of bleeding, blood work is all normal, urinalysis is normal, but on the day he's in the hospital, he has another pink poop, which means unfortunately the kid had to undergo a proctoscopy. That's when we do, with a small camera, we look at his lower GI system, his rectum and his intestines, to make sure that we can't see any bleeding. And they don't see any bleeding. But at this point, they're good scientists, so what do they do to test their hypothesis? They cram as much Frankenberry as they can into this kid. So they fed him bowl after bowl after bowl, and of course, what did they get? They got rainbow, strawberry-colored unicorn poop. All right, so maybe not the unicorn part, but the kid again pooped strawberry unicorn. At this point, just like the Empire Strikes Back, another pops up. And Mom says at home, there's a sister who's also been eating Frankenberry. So Mom calls home, and guess what? Sister now has strawberry ice cream colored poop as well. So as you suggested, this isn't even the only breakfast cereal that's known because of the dyes to color your poop. Blueberry, if you have that, once again, that's available in stores. That can give you blue poop. If you're a child of the 80s like I am, if you had Smurfberry Crunch, that was known to turn your poop green. So as you now go forth and enjoy lots of heavily dyed food, you can think about what color it's going to turn your poop at the end of the day. I do weird science a fair amount. It hasn't been as much after the pandemic as before, but I'm trying to ramp back up. But I can tell you this summer I'm going to do one in conjunction, and my plan is to use a European study and test this. So I'm talking to a baker about baking muffins that have blue dye in there, and I'm going to give everybody a link so they can monitor how long it takes for their poop to turn blue, log it in, and then we'll have that data to share. Yes?
What did Frankenberry think of this?
I think he was okay with it. I love Frankenberry, so. All right, so sticking with the theme here, in our next study, primitive populations. That's what we're going to look at here, some behaviors of primitive populations. They often had limited resources to work with, and I always think of the Flintstones, because, you know, that's good science. But when you think about primitive populations, what kind of stuff did they have to work with, to build with, to make tools, to build their buildings? What did they have to work with? Yeah?
Animal hides and animal bones is a big one.
Absolutely. Animal bones, animal hides. What else?
Tendons for rope.
Stuff around them.
Stuff around them, yeah. Yeah.
Animals.
Animals. Yeah.
Stone and obsidian.
Stone and obsidian, yeah. So stones of different hardness, you could do different kinds of things with. Yeah, anybody want to add anything else? Yeah.
Just the random growing trees as well as trees that they have chopped down.
Absolutely, trees, great resources that we can work with, yes.
They eventually started using iron and bronze.
Iron and bronze, yeah, that's getting a little more into like the Bronze Age when we develop some technology, absolutely. We're not going to talk about any of those resources. What we're going to talk about now is poop. This is like the poop section of Weird Science tonight. So there are a number of anecdotal stories of people working with poop as a resource. So there's an account of an old Inuit man who refused to move into a settlement. Over the objections of his family, he stayed on the ice. To stop him, they took away all of his tools trying to get him to come in. He said no. So in the middle of a winter gale, he stepped out of their igloo, he pooped, then he took the poop and fashioned it into a frozen blade, which he sharpened with a spray of saliva. And with the poop knife then, he actually killed a dog. So using the rib cage as a sled and its hide, as we talked about over here, to harness another dog, he disappeared into darkness.
No way he did that.
So, and we're going to test this. So anecdotal evidence that you can use poop in a frozen state as a resource to make tools. There are other examples. So, the thing I always like to ask at this point is, how would you study this? So the question we're trying to study is, can you use frozen poop as a blade or a knife? Yes.
Okay, so.
I love it. We're into this.
Depends
Yes.
if you're trying to stay accurate to the story or not.
Okay.
Because I would say the best way to do this is to use liquid nitrogen, because that is
Okay.
extremely cold temperatures. It's actually really fun. You can smash a banana into pieces. I haven't personally done it, but
So we're going to use liquid nitrogen to freeze the poop.
yes.
Okay. How are you going to form it into a blade?
That's true.
Yes.
He said he ended up using saliva, but if we use some other liquid that's going to be better,
Okay.
or if that might be more commonly used for fashioning similar stuff such as clay.
Okay, excellent. So we use some of
Or like
the
wood
properties
knives.
that we have in like pottery then to fashion our poop knife. That's excellent. So let's take it a further step back. What are you going to use for your poop? So poop is just what comes out. Is it going to matter what goes in to form the poop that you're working with?
Yeah.
Let me just say, I can't even imagine how many times I've said poop in like the last 15 minutes. Yes.
If I want some sort of fibrous, that's just sort of where my mind goes.
That's good. Yeah.
Something dense.
Something dense, yes. So you really want to pack your poop, get it solid, so you can work with it, yes.
And if you want your knife to be a fun color, you can have something dyed.
I have a little Frankenberry along with it. I love it, yes, because science is a part of art. They go together, yes, and we should definitely do that, yeah.
Have some meat.
Have some meat. You like that
It's
that
very
primitive, high meat kind of diet.
Yeah. You just don't the animal.
Yeah.
Don't eat a lot of fruit.
Don't eat a lot of fruit. So eat a lot of meats, a lot of fiber, don't eat a lot of fruit. All right. I love it. So another story, another theoretical incident. So there's a report that in 1953, Peter Fruchen, he dug himself a pit to sleep in and woke up trapped by snow. So to free himself, he pooped in his hand, sharpened it into a chisel, and waited for it to freeze solid. He then used the implement to free himself from the snow. So there are multiple stories like this, multiple legends almost of people being able to do this. We got to test it. Okay, so we talked about diet. One of these study scientists went on a diet of high protein and fatty acids, which they thought was consistent with an Arctic diet. So that person was on this diet for 8 days. You can see them here. So they ate things like eggs, beef snack bites, beef steak, turkey snack bites, lots of meat, salmon, beef. And you can see here when they collected the poop as they went along. Now, there was another individual, and we'll get to this, who actually maintained more of a modern diet, and they also collected poop there. So, raw material collection did not begin until day 4. I just showed you that, and then proceeded regularly for the next 5 days. Fecal samples were formed into ice 2 different ways. So in one case, they made a mold that they could put the poop in to form a knife, or they molded the poop by hand into a knife. Now, here is what the mold looked like. So this is them making the mold. So they took a stone that was sharp, and they used it to make an impression into clay, and then they baked the clay then so it could be a mold for the poop. So this is poop being put into the mold to form a knife. See, this is good science. This is why I call it weird science. So that's an example of how they made the poop knives using the mold. So here's an example of a poop knife that they hand shaped. So again, they shaped this by hand, and then they froze it, as was suggested, into the shape of a blade. So all fecal samples were stored at minus 20 degrees Celsius until the experiments began. That way they are frozen solid, trying to maximize if these will actually work as knives. Minutes prior to the experiments, both the knife mold poop knives and the hand-shaped poop knives were removed and were further sharpened with a metal chisel. So you can see the striations here from the metal chisel as they sharpen this. Again, trying to make this as accurate as possible as being to work as a poop knife. So knives were then buried for several minutes at minus 50 degrees Celsius, dry ice. So they use dry ice, not liquid nitrogen, but I love doing liquid nitrogen. So what did they cut then? They had pig hide, muscle, and tendons that were going to be what they tried to cut with the knife. Again, trying to mimic what might have been something an individual who had a poop knife might have actually been cutting. They stored those at minus 20. 2 days before the experiment, they allowed them to thaw to 4 degrees Celsius. So these are not necessarily frozen solid, they're cold, but our poop knives are ideally frozen solid. And Peppa Pig supports the use of pig tendons for this study. Okay, show of hands, how many people think the poop knives will be able to cut the material that we talked about? Pig tendons, pig hide. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, 8. And who says no? The poop knives are not going to be worth crap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, so we're about 50-50. All right, let's go to the data, because that is what science is all about. Here we have the pig hide, in which case we are slicing with the poop knife from the mold, and all it did was melt and leave streaks of poop on the pig hide. All right, so those are our mold knives. We also have our hand-shaped poop knives, same result. All they did was melt and leave streaks of poop on the hide they're trying to cut.
Don't eat it.
So this study is called Experimental Replication Shows Knives Manufactured from Frozen Human Feces Do Not Work. So this was published in the Journal of Archaeological Science back in 2019.
But I wonder if it would still dig you out if you were trapped in it. Snow
Take you in.
Maybe?
That might be our only
But again, that might be a good follow-up study.
Maybe ice.
Maybe we should do this next time. We'll collect some poop, we'll get in here and make some knives. No, too much. Too much. All right, so they tried it. I showed you guys they took poop from one person that was on a diet that seemed to be like an ancient diet. They also had a person then on a modern diet. They tried it again with the person, had the poop from the modern diet, still didn't work. So diets didn't seem to matter. The poop knives always melted when they actually tried to cut with them. And as they say, our results suggest that knives manufactured from frozen human feces are not functional. But they do note, and I really like this, anthropologists must actively seek out unsupported claims, assumptions, rumors, and urban legends, and by testing them, ensure any narratives that follow are as sturdy as possible. So, urban legends are fun, but it's not science, and we have to apply good science to them. All right.
So the conclusion is go to town when they ask you to
Yes,
go to town?
when they tell you to go to town, you go to town. Poop isn't going to save you, you go to town. All right, so all in all, a decent study, pretty good. Unfortunately, again, another thing is busting. Science, I hope you can appreciate, is a process. It's not a set of facts, and unfortunately, a lot of times that's what we're taught, is science is a bunch of facts. It's a process. So now, not only have we talked about science, and we've worked through science, we've designed experiments, now you're going to do science. So what I'm going to have you do is you are all going to be experiments. You're all going to be experimenters in a scientific study. What we're going to do is try to replicate the results from the published scientific study. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set you up with the science study. I'm going to let you do it, and then when you're done, we're going to look at our data, and we're going to compare our data to the study as it was published. Are you ready?
What if I don't have to poop?
Thankfully, it's not going to involve poop. This 100% voluntary. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. There is no requirement. This is for fun because science is fun and doing science is fun. I like to think this is almost more of an engineering question than a scientific one. So you're working in a hospital setting. Like in this case, it's a doctor's office. And it's not just a doctor's office, it's a pediatric, it's a kid's doctor's office. And you know, when kids go to the doctor, they're upset. They don't want to be there, they don't feel good. And it's hard to figure out what you can do in this setting to make the kids just a little bit happier. But that's what you're going to do. One of the things, if you work in medicine, that you can do is cool stuff with gloves. So what I have here are a bunch of nitrile gloves, and I have black Sharpie markers. So what I want you to do is take gloves, take Sharpie markers, blow them up in some way, and create something that you can use to distract, to make a kid feel a little bit better in a setting like this. Okay? I'm going to give you some time to do this. Then we're going to look at what you made and compare it to the scientific study that you guys are out to replicate. Okay? So, gloves, markers, go to town.
I'm going in.
Yeah, okay, I have the feeling that she's really quite
Yeah. Yeah. It's not, they are. Do you want to pass this down?
He's getting you one that fits.
Do you need to spread them on help blowing it up? And then you can do whatever?
Yes,
All right, okay, everybody finished? Have a design that they have in mind, because the study that we're talking about is the Jedward versus the Mohawk, a prospective study on a pediatric distraction technique. So this was published in BMJ in 2014. So what they did, they're looking at mohawks. Everybody knows what a mohawk is, a single line of hair going from front to back, versus Jedwards. Anybody know what a Jedward is? This is a British thing named after a boy band. I am not an expert on boy bands, but this is a Jedward. So the hair, the single line of hair, instead of going front to back, it goes from left to right. So mohawk versus Jedward, okay? So who here created something where the fingers of the glove are like a mohawk? They go front to back. Raise your hand. I gotta write this down. We got
That's what I was
2,
gonna do, but
3,
didn't get
okay.
it.
What? We got mohawk.
I don't know if I got it.
Who did a Jedward where the hair goes left to right? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I didn't say hair, it's out.
What's that?
I didn't know.
It's a technical alien.
Okay, who did something different than a Jedward or a mohawk? Perfect. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we got 5 others. Okay.
So you have to take out my other one.
6.
All right. We got 6. Okay. Yep, I subtracted out your other one. Okay, the study that we're talking about, they took 149 patients going to an emergency room in the UK. 13 declined to participate, so they got 136 patients. They then asked them, would you like a glove blown up that's a Jedward or a mohawk? Kids, 55% picked a Jedward, 45% picked a mohawk. For us, we had 3 mohawks versus 4 Jedwards. So we showed a slight preference for Jedwards, just like they did.
Huh. That is interesting.
But what's interesting is we had the largest group that did something different. So if you guys have some great examples here, so I slide-showed you some other examples. So from other studies, I've added all together. Mohawks, we've had 73 total, so we've got some really good mohawks here. Jedwards, I love this one, very clever. That's a good one down there too, Jedwards. But, like I said, we've got an awesome category of others here. So people being very creative with other kinds of creations, not just a Jedward or a mohawk. I love the jellyfish idea here, hanging down with the fingers as tentacles. We've got a cat. Kind of an elephant here. I thought that was very creative. I love this one. Got glasses and a big nose. And really, this allowed me to create a whole new category. So now we don't just have Jedwards and Mohawks, now we've got creations where you're using the thumb as a nose. So a whole different category than they noted in their study. So another one with the thumb as a nose. Here's one that's a hand, okay? But a different concoction. This guy should probably not be around kids. I thought this was very clever, where now the fingers are kind of in the middle of the face. And if you notice, I didn't specify that you had to use just one. This person used multiple ones. So again, very clever. So not only did our results somewhat mimic what was published, because of the way I asked the question, we actually created a whole different category other than Jedward and Mohawk. And out of that, we found a new category, people using the thumb as the nose. So the take-home message here is the way you ask your scientific question, your hypothesis, directly impacts the results you get. If you never ask for anything outside of a Jedward or a Mohawk, you're going to miss out on all of that other creative stuff that you guys came up with. So you're going to miss out on all of that interesting science, and your results aren't going to be as accurate as they could be. So again, your hypothesis makes all the difference. So thank you for coming tonight. I love doing this kind of stuff. Like I said, I've done weird science forever. You have been a great group to work with tonight. Hopefully you've taken a little bit of science away with you. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, I have a Facebook group. It's called Weird Science with Rob Pyatt. This is the main picture on the group. It's an interactive group. People post their own interesting science studies they find. I post fun science studies. We talk about it. And I appreciate if you're not a social media person, but if you are, this is something you might enjoy. I also have a podcast I do with a friend of mine called Trackside Science. We tend to talk about science, but not about any individual study. So it's all about the stuff that goes on to make science happen, not any particular discipline. So it's a little discipline non-specific like that. Thank you guys for having me come. I love doing weird science. Thank you guys for being a great audience tonight.
I think our very young